From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hope everyone's Lent is going well. We're marching ahead towards Easter Sunday, and I'm so excited for Easter Sunday this year. And the week afterwards will be the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis, and he's one of my favorite saints. Perhaps he's my patron saint in some ways of Miracle Hunter because he spent all his time building websites and otherwise. So about miracles. So we're so excited for that canonization to be coming up soon. And related to Carlo Acutis, of course, was his focus on Eucharistic miracles. And later in the show today, we're going to be speaking with Sean McAfee, who's got a brand new book that's coming out about Eucharistic miracles, and we'll be excited to chat with Sean later in the show. Of course, this is the time of Lent leading into Holy Week coming upon us shortly, and we talk about the passion and death of Christ. And one great guest that we've got coming on today is going to be talking about the Shroud of Turin, or the Holy Winding Sheet, as it was once called, and that is Chuck Neff. He's going to be talking to us about his film on that topic, the Holy Winding Sheet, and we'll find out more about the Shroud of Turin and how that can be used, perhaps, to evangelize. We'll also be speaking with Dan Cheely about Relics of the Passion. He's a church historian. He's been on the show before, and he's going to sort of break down what we know for a fact and what things are questionable or legendary of the relics that exist from Christ's Passion. So we'll be looking forward to talking with Dan later in the show. Check out my series on EWTN. I've got two of them. They Might Be Saints and Explore with the Miracle Hunter. For this Tuesday, April 8th, we've got the episode of They Might Be Saints about Montse Grasses. And we'll also be showing the episode of Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Rocamadour in France. And that'll be Saturday, April 12th at 5 p.m. Central Time. Check that one out. That was an absolutely beautiful place to see, and it's one of the newer episodes. So if you haven't seen that one, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Rocamadour is on Saturday, April 12th. And if you're not going to tune into the shows but would rather see the places in person, you can join me on a Jubilee Year pilgrimage. I'm going to be going to Milan, Turin, Florence, and Rome for the canonization of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. The dates on that are July 28th through August 4th, coming right up, and people can go to pilgrimages.com/miraclehunter to sign up. And we'll be going, of course, to places of saints and miracles. We'll be seeing the Marian apparition sites, visit the Duomo in Milan. We'll visit Turin to see the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, where the Shroud of Turin is held. We'll walk in the footsteps of Pier Giorgio and see the places where St. John Bosco had his famous visions. And we'll go to Florence to see the home of many great artists, including Michelangelo's David, as well as we'll go to this apparition site of Mary, to the 7 holy founders of the Servites. And we'll finish up in Rome to see the many incredible sites around the Vatican, finishing with the canonization of one of the great modern saints. That's Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. So check that one out, pilgrimages.com/miraclehunter for more information on that. Later in the show, we're going to be talking about the Might Be Saint of the Day, and we'll be looking at the Might Be Saint, Blessed Saturnina Rodriguez de Zavala, who lived from 1823 to 1896 in Argentina. In the 365 Days with Mary project, we look at a Marian devotion that lines up each and every day to the calendar year. For today's date, we've got Holy Mary of Gilbomana from Sicily in Italy in the year 1534. And the question of the week, has DNA ever been found on Eucharistic miracles? That's an interesting question. I'll do my best to answer that one. And the miracle of the day is the alleged apparitions that happened in Heide in Germany. So we'll talk about that one later in the show. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening all around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And for people who want to keep up to date with the latest miracle news, they can go to the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter, and that's where we post all the miracle stories that have been reported and are happening. And one fascinating story that was recently reported, and again, this is an alleged miracle because when we talk about the canonization of saints, the miracles that are used to propel them to blessed and saint. Those need to be fully investigated on the local level, and then that needs to be sent to Rome in a formal presentation, this positio. Then it usually takes years for the medical commission to analyze it and render a judgment. And the majority of judgments, of course, are that it's not quite a miracle. There might be a natural cause. There might be some complications when praying to multiple saints, for example. But in this particular case, we have an alleged miracle that is maybe being considered as a possible final miracle for the canonization of Blessed Solanus Casey. So there was a report of a Michigan teenager's unexpected healing after prayers to Blessed Solanus Casey, and this could be the miracle that the church needs to move from blessed to saint. And so there's this girl, 16-year-old Mary Berthold of DeWitt, Michigan, was facing surgery after doctors discovered tumors on both her ovaries in May, and this was reported by the Detroit Free Press. And as she prepared for what could have been a life-changing operation, her parents, Susan and Rick Bartold, they turned to prayer and they made a pilgrimage to the Solanus Casey Center in Detroit and included a novena for his intercession. And Mary's a sophomore at this Lansing Catholic High School, and she first had experienced sharp pains during school last April. And she says, I was toppled over. I couldn't move at all. It was hurting so bad. So when the pain persisted, people were more concerned. In a CT scan, an ultrasound revealed these results, including a 7.5 centimeter mass on her left ovary and a 1.5 centimeter mass on the right. And doctors feared an emergency could result in the loss of her reproductive organs, and this possibility, of course, was devastating. And physicians at the University of Michigan determined the masses were teratomas, that are typically benign tumors, but still requiring surgical removal. And they scheduled the procedure for August 2nd of last year. And they trusted in the power of prayer. They visited the shrine of the Solanus Casey Center July 6th, and they asked not only for Mary's healing, but also that she be granted the grace to travel this road that the Lord has put before her. That's the quote. And so the family rallied others in the community to join them in this novena to Blessed Solanus. And then came July 30th, the feast day of Blessed Solanus, and she went in MRI early that morning. And as Susan drove her to the appointment, they said the prayer aloud, Solanus, this is your feast day. I know you have big news. And that evening, Susan saw the results of Mary's patient portal. It appeared the tumors were gone. And the next day, Mary's doctor called and confirmed it. And there's nothing there. It's all gone, the doctor said. And they apologized for the delay in calling. But they wanted to make sure that was the correct news, and they had to cancel. They were able to cancel the surgery. And, of course, they thought it was a mistake, but the reality sank in, and her response was simple. I was so grateful I didn't have to have surgery. And, of course, this is a potential miracle that's been reported to the cause for Blessed Solanus Casey. We don't know going forward what the Vatican is going to say about it, but potentially this could be a case that's considered for his canonization, because one miracle is needed for beatification and a subsequent miracle for canonization. So we'll look forward to hearing more about this potential miracle, and I'll definitely report on it as soon as I hear more. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week. We ask a trivia question and give a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. And last week we talked to Dr. Timothy Malaya about Christ's Passion. And keeping in the theme of medical doctors, we said, who is the patron saint? Name one of the patron saints of medical doctors. I knew there were several of them. Of course, the most famous one being St. Luke, and then you have Saints Cosmas and Damian, and Dr. Jose Gregorio Hernandez from Venezuela, a more recent saint. These are all people that are considered patron saints of medical doctors, and writing in with the correct answer of St. Luke was Mary Glantz from Michigan. So thank you, Mary, for your question and answer, and you're the winner of the prize, the image of the faces of Mary. And so for this week's question, we were talking just a little bit ago about Solanus Casey, the blessed from Michigan, who might go on to become a saint. And the question for today is, how many other venerables, blesseds, or saints were born or lived a significant amount of time in Michigan? Again, how many other venerable, blesseds, or saints were born or spent significant time in Michigan If you think you know that answer when we win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the winner, and answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking to Dan Cheely, church historian, about the relics of the Passion. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got one of our favorite guests joining us today to talk about one of the, in my opinion, one of the very interesting things as it relates to the passion and death of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is some of the relics that have made it down through the ages, and they're purported to be the real ones. Perhaps we're talking about the cross or the sign above Jesus' head, the titulus, maybe the nails, maybe the Veronica veil, all these things that we read about, that we kind of meditate on, reflect on, these objects, these moments in Christ's passion, but are the ones that exist today for people to actually see when they go to Rome, perhaps, are they the real ones? And so we've got no one better to chat with us today than Dan Cheely, a church historian who's joined us on numerous programs talking about such things in the past. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
It's always good to be with you, Michael.
Yeah, it's great to chat about this, and the timing is good as we will be rolling into Holy Week and not too long here, and hope everyone out there is having a good Lent, but it's always good timing to reflect on the passion and death of Jesus Christ as we roll into Easter. And I think that, as I mentioned here, we have a number of objects, whether they're mentioned in the Bible or they come down to us through tradition, the Veronica veil, for example. There are a number of objects that are out there that makes us wonder, are they the real ones? Are they? Is it something that, according to pious tradition, we sort of have these objects that stand in the place of the real ones, or are they the real thing? So when we talk about perhaps the greatest of all relics, we might even refer to the Shroud of Turin, the Veronica veil, but how about the cross, the true cross? I know there have been Protestants and otherwise who have made fun of Catholics for their clinging to relics, you might say, or to wanting to catalog relics and hold them up. But and they have said things like, you can, if you collected all the relics of the true cross around the world, you could build a boat. So what do we know about the true cross as of today?
Well, the pedigree of the relics of the true cross goes back pretty substantially to the reign of the Emperor Constantine. And once the church became free, and Constantine, really felt that it was Jesus Christ, the God of the Christians, that gave him the victory over the civil war that was going on in the Roman Empire. So he was very pro-Christian. And his mother had, converted to Christianity even earlier. And so he commissioned her to go back to the Holy Land and find out what, specifically, what relics she could find. Could she scout the area out and determine where the various holy events had happened? And it's very interesting what she did. I mean, she was already an elderly woman. I mean, she was pushing 80, when she went out there. And but she had the whole power of the empire, a united empire behind her. And also, too, the church was kind of on a rise for a lot of reasons. Not only had it been free for a good 11 years or 12 years or so, but after the Council of Nicaea, there at least was a temporary union of Christians in the church, and they were taking converts in. And there's a great deal of enthusiasm that was for Christianity around the empire. And she went back actually to indigenous Christians there and the Jewish population that was still the remnant of the Jewish population that was still in the Holy Land at the time. to try to unearth, where stuff was. And she found the holy site, and apparently relying on local people, including some names of whom we actually know, Joseph of Tiberias and Judah of Jerusalem. They pointed out to her that the tradition had kept that the site, for example, the Holy Sepulchre, was now occupied by at Mount Calvary, a temple complex, a pagan temple complex of the Roman god Venus, goddess Venus. Okay, so going around, they also told them that in the area they would, because the artifacts associated with crucifixion were particularly obnoxious, particularly unclean to the Jews, they would normally be buried in a pit associated with the place of execution. So they went digging around, and they found a pit. And in that pit, they found 3 crosses and a number of other objects that were thrown in there. And the general location of it had been preserved in the memory of both the indigenous Christian population and the Jewish people. And one of the things that actually, in a way, turned out to backfire on the Romans was that in an attempt to make sure that Christians wouldn't go around, they built pagan shrines over Bethlehem and over the Calvary and the Holy Sepulchre, but that made the place clear where it was, because for 200, let's see, it had been over 150 years, since the Second Jewish Rebellion. They had built, the Emperor Hadrian had built these pagan shrines there, but they knew where they were, and that knocking them down, which took a lot of chutzpah on Constantine's part, they were able to find the foundations, and they were able to find the pit, and indeed, most of the holy objects that are especially placed in Rome and other places are able to be traced pretty well back to Helen's sleuthing back in 326 to 330 AD. So now, before that, we don't really have a pedigree. But from the time of Helen, a lot of the better relics, the ones that are in Rome, and particularly, he built a special church in Rome to house a lot of them. It's called Santa Croce in Jerusalem, and that is one of the 7 major basilicas of Rome, and a lot of these are preserved. In fact, interestingly enough, the major part of the cross that was identified as Christ's cross was actually divided into 3 principal parts. One was sent to Rome. One part was kept. The biggest part was kept in Jerusalem, actually. And then another part was sent to the new capital in Constantinople, or Byzantium, whatever you want to call it. And that's many of the relics trace their history back there. Now, the myth that you've got enough wood in the relics of the true cross around the world to build a ship is actually just something that some wag invented out of whole cloth. I think Erasmus quoted that, Voltaire passed it on, but there really is no basis for that. It's just somebody made it up. And indeed, get a load of this. Somebody actually took a survey of the documented pieces of the true cross of the various shrines around the world, and they don't even amount to a complete cross. So, I mean, that is just a statement that scoffers made without any substantiation to it whatsoever.
And any of the true cross relics, they come with some sort of verifying pedigree paperwork that travels with them, correct? Anything that doesn't have that?
Well, nowadays it does. Okay, but back, in the time of, they didn't have the Dewey Decimal System or the cataloging system that we have now. But on the other hand, there are a lot of contemporary witnesses to attesting to what happened. For example, a very interesting relic that's got a pretty good pedigree to it is the sudarium, the face cloth of Oviedo.
Right.
And that, can be traced all the way back to Jerusalem and going ahead of the Muslim invasions. First, it was transferred from Jerusalem to Egypt, then it went from Egypt ultimately across North Africa to Spain, and Spain is where it stayed. And that is it's a very interesting relic that has its own markings on it. And those markings are completely consistent both in positioning and in blood type with the Shroud of Turin.
Fascinating. We're talking today with Dan Cheely, church historian, about some of the famous relics related to Christ's Passion. We've talked about the cross, the face cloth known as the sudarium. How about the other of the very famous ones? We talk about the crown of thorns. It was held in France, I think, for some time, maybe even in Notre Dame prior to it burning. What do we know about the crown of thorns, and is this more of a legendary relic?
Well, the crown of thorns has a kind of a little bit of a sad history to it, in the sense that because it is composed of a lot of movable, disposable parts, because it is indeed a crown of thorns. Over the centuries, people who were in possession of the crown of thorns thought that they could pretty much get rid of a thorn here or there and give them off as precious relic gifts to other people. And it got pretty diluted over the course of time. I mean, if you go and see the crown of thorns, though, you'll be a little bit surprised, because what's left of it in Paris is pretty much the base of it. The thorns are pretty much gone. I mean, they've been destroyed, sent around all over the place. But interestingly enough, and so it's a little bit disappointing, if you get to go to the treasury at Saint-Chapelle in France, which is absolutely magnificent structure by its own right, just the decorations of it. You see, hey, this doesn't look like a crown of thorns. And one of the interesting things here is that the original crown of thorns was not like was usually depicted in Catholic and Orthodox iconography. In Catholic traditional iconography, the crown of thorns is depicted as kind of more like a wreath of thorns, kind of like a laurel wreath made out of thorns.
Right.
But what it actually was, according to the earliest people who saw it after the time of Empress Helena, was more like a round crown that would be more like a cap, kind of like what the King of England would wear, but all composed of thorns. So it's actually more fiendishly torturous than the wreath. It's bad enough to get your forehead and the back of your head straight. This was the whole head of Christ that was covered with this makeshift, horrible, torturous crown that when they were, when the gospel said they were striking him on the head with a reed, I mean, they were really, covering his head with blood. And what's left is the base, which is the base of this, that the thorns were, hoisted on. They kind of plated, as they say in the gospel. They plated a crown of thorns. They constructed a torture hat, basically, a torture crown for Jesus Christ, and rubbed it in, literally, with blows. And so that's why it's a little bit confusing if you go to Paris and you see this what looks like a wreath of reeds, not of thorns. Now, interestingly enough, though, with modern science, they've analyzed those reeds, and those reeds actually come from the plant called the Spina Domini, the crown of Christ, or the thorns of Christ, that is grows in the Holy Land and is a particularly special kind of thorn. It's not just the kind of thorns you see on a rose over at the florist shop. It's a double thorn. It's very unique to that particular plant. And many of the thorns that have been distributed around the world to different places that ask for it as a favor from a king or an emperor. Indeed, are these double thorns that are indeed traceable to that precise plant.
Fascinating. We've been talking today with Dan Cheely, church historian, about some of these relics of Christ's Passion, and we could talk for hours, Dan, about the titulus, the sign above Jesus' head, or the Veronica veil that's in the Vatican. There are so many various objects that have been associated with Christ's Passion and death, or the nails, or any of these others that have gained some attention over the years. Well, we're out of time for today, but we're so grateful to you, Dan Cheely, for joining us on this show. And as we wrap up the show, I'll just leave it to you, Dan. What can we benefit from seeing these relics in person, reading about them, learning about them, meditating on how they were used? What can we do when we consider these relics that are with us today, or those objects that are meant to inspire our imaginations? What can we do as we reflect on these during Lent?
Well, the supernatural faith that we need to have, is not just that there was a wonderful man named Jesus who died a horrible death, but inspired us with his teaching and with his life around the world. Okay, that's good, but that's literally the tip of the iceberg. What we really have is a story of God's direct personal intervention into human history. And this is God doing it. So anything that God touches is transformed. I mean, you give Jesus 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and you feed 5,000 people. So this is why these relics are so meaningful to us, because it shows how close God has come to us and still comes to us. And that going to him and being close to him, just like when Lydia touched the tassel of Christ's cloak, she was healed of some disease that she had for decades. Getting close to Christ as best we can, and we are human, so we need physical objects. It helps us. It revs up in our mind the reality of Jesus Christ and the power of the person that he is. It's a divine power, and we need it, and it can help us.
Very well put. Well, we're so grateful to you, Dan Cheely, church historian, for sharing some of your knowledge and your passion for this history. We thank you so much for joining us on today's program.
Always good to be with you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Dan. God bless. That was Dan Cheely, church historian, talking to us about the relics of Christ's Passion. Absolutely fascinating stuff. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I love hearing what people are thinking about. And when I give talks, I give something like 15 or 20 talks a year at various Catholic shrines or churches or conferences. And I always talk about miracles. And when I do, I talk about Eucharistic miracles pretty commonly these days, or the apparitions of Mary, or how the church investigates. But I love opening it up to questions afterwards. And I gave some talks recently where the questions were really great. And it's always fun to hear what people are thinking about. But here's a question that I got at the end of a talk related to Eucharistic miracles. And the question was, has DNA ever been found on Eucharistic miracles? And it's an interesting thing, of course. Everybody knows that our sort of biological fingerprint is DNA, so that we know that nobody else in the entire world, all 6 or 7 billion people, however many people there are in the world these days, has the same fingerprint biologically in DNA as we do. And that's why they use it for proof positive in murder trials, for example, knowing exactly that if DNA is found in the blood, who that person really was. So that's sort of our signature. And so the question is, What about Eucharistic miracles? And that, of course, are those cases from around the world where flesh and blood is found on a consecrated Eucharistic host. And they have found in these samples that it is human blood with hemoglobins and other markers that we know that it's truly human blood. And the question is, they can get the blood type off of these, and in the cases that they have done blood typing on, we see blood type AB as the common blood group that comes back. But what about DNA? Wouldn't that be very interesting if the case in Italy matched the case in Buenos Aires, Argentina, matched the case in Mexico, matched other cases around the world? What if they all matched? Wouldn't that convert a few hearts? Well, they have attempted to do DNA testing, and it's never come back with any results. And so there are various theories on why that could be. Of course, some people might say, well, God doesn't want to be able to be cloned if they did find DNA. Well, that's interesting. And then there are other cases where they say that perhaps this indicates something about Jesus's parents. Interesting. And perhaps there are people who say the DNA has been damaged and it's impossible to get a good sample from this. But even in the case of Tixla in Mexico, one of the more recent cases where they were able to test the blood right away after it was discovered, the doctors and scientists were not able to identify any DNA in that sample. So it's truly fascinating. It's a real mystery. We don't really know what it means or why it is, but I'm quite sure that with every new Eucharistic miracle that's found, where true blood is found on it, they're actually going to attempt again to get DNA from these samples. So it's a great question. So thank you for that question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe we'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we talk about the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Fatima, May 13th, their Guadalupe, December 12th, their Lourdes, February 11th, but believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion for each and every day of the calendar year. And this could be feast days or the building of a basilica or a great miracle that happened on that day or some other association for each day with a different title of Mary from around the world. And so for today's date, we've got Holy Mary of Gibilmana from Sicily in the year 1534. And the story goes that on Easter Sunday, April 5th in 1534, a boat carrying the statue took refuge from a storm near the village of Castello de Rochela, and legend has it that the Virgin Mary appeared to a Capuchin friar who lived in Gibilmana, telling him to fetch the statue from the ox-drawn wagon and build a shrine. Like in many stories about miraculous statues of the Virgin Mary, at a certain point the statue became so heavy that the oxen refused to move it any further, and this became an indication that this spot was to be selected for the shrine built for Mary. And that is Holy Mary of Gibilmana in Sicily in the year 1534, and that's today's 365 Days with Mary title. And you can find more about this project if you go to the website, or you download the free app from the iOS App Store, or you pick up the book, 365 Days with Mary. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week where we talk about a miracle that's happened on this date at some year in Christian history. And on April 5th in 1939, in Hida in Germany, one of the visionaries, alleged visionaries I should say, Margaret, reported an apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And during this encounter, Margaret asked Mary how she wished to be invoked, to which Mary was said to respond as Queen and Queen of the Holy Souls. And when asked about the preferred prayer, Mary was said to indicate the Litany of Loreto. And these alleged apparitions in Hida are part of a series of reported apparitions that occurred between 1937 and 1940, emphasizing themes of prayer and penance. And the church has never fully recognized these apparitions. Perhaps they're under consideration. But this is an alleged apparition at this point, but one that was reported on April 5th, 1939. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week. We try to keep you up to date with the sainthood causes that are moving along. And sometimes every month they come out with new statements. And just this past week, On March 28th, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, authorized the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints to promulgate the decrees regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Jose Antonio Maria Itapina. He's a diocesan priest born on August 5th, 1806, in Sobral, Brazil, and he died on February 19th in 1883 in Solanea in Brazil. And according to the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints website, he was a diocesan priest with a spirit of fortitude, and he decided to move from professional to priestly life. He chose to live in an austere manner, and he faced the hardships due to his mission, and he was always obedient to his bishop and faithful to the church. He practiced his work with an evangelical spirit without seeking honors and recognition. And so that is now Venerable Jose Antonio Maria Ibiapina, and with one miracle, he will be declared a blessed, and with 2 miracles, he'll become a saint. And for those people who are interested in the Might Be Saint of the Day, and we talk about this all the time, it lines up to my television series, They Might Be Saints, and also my book, They Might Be Saints, of the same title. You can get that from EWTNRC.com. We talk about people whose feast day or death anniversary lines up exactly to the day's date. So for today's date, we've got Blessed Saturnina Rodriguez de Zavalia, who lived from 1823 to 1896 in Argentina. And she was born on November 27th in 1823 in Cordoba in Argentina as Saturnina Rodriguez. And though she felt an early call to religious life, Saturnina married the widower Manuel Antonio de Zavalia on August 13th, 1852, and became stepmother to his son and daughter. And they were together a little over 12 years, during which they lost their only daughter to a miscarriage, and she was widowed in 1865, and then Saturnina began to give in to the call to religious life, and she founded the Esclavas de Corazón de Jesús, the Slaves of the Heart of Jesus, in Argentina, and she took the name Sister Catalina of Mary, and she set out to do good works across Argentina. And the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola were key in the formation of her spiritual life, and later in life she assisted the work of St. Jose Gabriel de Rosario Brochero, and she died on April 5th, 1896 in Cordoba in Argentina of natural causes. She was declared venerable in 1997 by Pope John Paul II, and she was declared blessed by Pope Francis on November 25th, 2017, and her recognition of beatification was in Cordoba, Argentina, with Cardinal Angelo Amato as the chief celebrant, and the beatification miracle that was used was the 1998 healing from severe heart disease of a woman in the Tucumán province of Argentina. And she is the might-be saint of the day, Blessed Saturnina Rodriguez de Zavalia. With 1 miracle, she will be declared a saint. And for those people who are interested in checking out my series, They Might Be Saints, you can check out an episode on Father Michael McGivney. I'll examine the canonization cause of Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, beatified in 2020 after the miraculous cure of the young boy attributed to him. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Chuck Neff about his film about the Shroud of Turin, The Holy Winding Sheet. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. When we talk about the resurrection of Jesus, I think we have this persistent, ongoing reminder. People can actually see an object that helps us recall the passion and death of Christ in Turin in Italy. And it's currently known as the Shroud of Turin, as that's the resting place or the holding place of this purported burial cloth of Christ. But there's an incredible history that goes into where that cloth came from, and is it truly the burial cloth of Christ? There's a lot of evidence out there that suggests that it is, and perhaps the question of how it was made is the strongest argument of all. There's not a real solid theory of how this cloth was made, even with our modern technology and science, able to come up with in all sorts of analysis. So I think it's an incredible object, perhaps in a chiropoita, or not made from human hands image, that we have here in our world today. And so we're so excited to be joined again by Chuck Neff. He's the executive producer of this film called The Holy Winding Sheet, and he's with Salt River Productions. And this is a film that traces back the amazing history of this cloth that was once known as the Holy Winding Sheet. Welcome back to the show today, Chuck.
For having me. Pleasure to be with you again.
It's great to reconnect with you. And I think that this cloth, this Shroud of Turin, this Holy Winding Sheet, is always with us. This is a persistent, constant reminder of the passion and death of Jesus Christ. And it's a mysterious object that we don't really know where it came from or how it came to be. There's lots of theories out there, but none has proven. We haven't been able to prove anything yet. How did you get interested in this project, the Holy Winding Sheet?
Well, I had always had, I don't know if devotion is the right word, but certainly a great interest, was always intrigued by the shroud. And then I started just hearing people talking about it, and it became very clear that there were a lot of people who had never heard of it, a lot of people who, if they had heard of it, didn't believe that it might be the burial cloth of Jesus. And so I just kind of had this idea, well, gosh, could we create something that would basically educate, not a general audience, but educate a younger audience? So could we produce a documentary that would go into the shroud and really do it for an audience of high school kids, 7th and 8th graders, but really a younger audience? And so I had the idea, well, let's don't get a bunch of white coats on here and talk about all of the scientific evidence and everything. What if we could come up with a way to do a program on the shroud through the eyes of some high school students? So the initial idea was to get a group of high school kids together and let them do their own investigation and just kind of see what they came up with. And I approached, we live in the St. Louis area, and I approached a number of Catholic high schools in the St. Louis area to say, hey, would you work with us? And they said, oh, man, that's a great idea. Yeah, we'll really work with you. And then nobody would ever call me back. And so I had this idea for really a couple of years, and then was over at a local high school on another project, and I would always get the question here in the St. Louis area, so what are you working on now, Chuck? And I said, well, and I realized that maybe this was the school, so I mentioned this to the teacher there, what we wanted to do, and she says, we'll do it. We will absolutely do this. Good. And so we had to do it through the eyes of, basically it was a senior thesis, through the eyes of one high school student. So we, this young man named Parker Dow, he spent the summer with us, and we took him, and he met all the experts. He did all of the interviews. He ended up doing the voiceover on it, and it was basically his research project. Obviously with the experts talking about it, and we put together the Holy Winding Sheet, and it's been very well received.
Wonderful. That's a great backstory. We're talking today with Chuck Neff, executive producer from Salt River Productions. We're talking about a film called The Holy Winding Sheet about the Shroud of Turin. And for people out there who hear this name, Holy Winding Sheet, I think there are plenty of people who have heard of the Shroud of Turin, but what is that name, the Holy Winding Sheet?
Well, I always ask the question. So it did not get to Turin until 1578. And the story I heard was that St. Charles Borromeo, the Cardinal Bishop of Milan, he worked with victims of the plague, and he ended up getting very, very sick, eventually died from that. But one of his last wishes was to be able to see the shroud again before he died. Well, now it's in France, and they knew there was no way he was going to get across the Alps into France to see the shroud. So they brought it to him. They brought it back to Turin in 1578, and it's been there ever since. So the question is, what was it called before it got to Turin? Well, it was called the Holy Winding Sheet. There was actually a feast day, May 4th, the Feast of the Holy Winding Sheet. So it came across the Alps in 1578. It's been in Turin ever since.
Absolutely amazing. We're talking with Chuck Neff today about this film, The Holy Winding Sheet, about the Shroud of Turin. And in your study of the Shroud of Turin, or the Holy Winding Sheet, however we might call it, what stuck out to you as far as hearing the interviews with the experts that were done for this program, or your own research into it? What stands out to you making this cloth well beyond a medieval forgery, something that we need to pay attention to?
Well, I always go back to the blood on the shroud. There is actual human blood on the Shroud of Turin. And it's type AB. They were able to determine that. And what's so interesting to me is that when you go back and look at the Eucharistic miracles, and I go back to Lanciano in 750, and the miracle of priest didn't believe in the real presence of Christ, right. And so the host actually turned to flesh and blood. So the blood type on the Eucharistic miracles worldwide, AB, the same that's found on the Shroud of Turin. When we were there in 2015 when it was on public display. We actually in the program, we actually have the actual shroud as part of the program on public display. So when you're close to it, it's hard to see. It's hard to see the image. But I stepped back in the back of the cathedral there in Turin, and now you can really see it. You can see the front and back sides of the body. You can see the Lord's head. You can see the wounds, and you can see all of that. Standing in the back of the cathedral, and I'm looking at this and realizing there's blood on the shroud, and this blood is the blood that Jesus Christ shed for us, for you, Michael, and for me, and for everybody listening today. The blood on the Shroud of Turin is the blood that Jesus Christ shed on the cross.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. We're talking today with Chuck Neff about the Shroud of Turin and his film, The Holy Winding Sheet. And I think that with the Shroud, there's any number of things from a medical or scientific perspective that are fascinating, related to the pollen, perhaps, which traces all over through France and the Holy Land, or the fact that the linen has been recently identified as being without doubt from the Holy Land as its origin. So there's any number of things related to the anatomy and the depiction of the body and the blood flow and all these things. And it seems when you add all those things up, it seems like it's a believable type of thing. But of course, we run into the carbon-14 testing from 1988. Talk a little bit about that testing, Chuck, and what that's done for sort of the belief in the shroud as this authentic shroud of Christ.
Yeah, well, I always say, why wouldn't you want to believe in this, first of all? But anyway, so let me see if I can paint the picture. So if you look at the shroud, and most of your audience will have seen it when it's kind of horizontal, and the sample that was used in the carbon dating was taken from the very upper left-hand corner. Now, there are artist depictions of the shroud, and it was put on public display a lot in Turin, and the people would hold it up in the corners so people could see it. And so the sample was taken from the very upper left-hand corner as you're looking at it. And what they think happened was that because it got worn, there was a reweave. So there were some sisters back in the Middle Ages who basically went in and they believe reweaved that part of the shroud. So the carbon dating may be accurate in terms of the piece they actually took from the shroud. The experts will tell you this is the worst place they could have taken any sample to carbon date. So there's a lot of questions about that the sample was not taken from that. They'd like to test it again and get a better sample. But that's kind of what's going on. So the sample was taken from the very upper, just a little bit of the corner on the upper left-hand side as you would look at the shroud today. So there's a lot of questions around that, and I think you get back to all of the scientific evidence and from the pollen, which pollen in the shroud traces back to only one place in the world, the Holy Land in the springtime. And there's just all sorts of other scientific evidence which points very directly to the Shroud of Turin as the burial cloth of Jesus. Russ Briota has become a good friend over the years. He's one of the shroud experts that we have on the program. And he asked the question, which I always ask, first of all, there's no doubt there was a human body in this linen cloth. So if it's not the burial cloth of Jesus, what is it? And if the man in the shroud is not Jesus, who is it? And nobody can answer those questions.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Chuck Neff about the Shroud of Turin. And the big question for you, Chuck, is if this is truly the burial cloth of Christ, what does that mean?
Well, it means, the Lord is risen. Hallelujah. That's what we're celebrating. That's just another... It's a witness to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And for all of us who believe in the Lord, for all of us who, believe and trust in the teachings of the Catholic Church, the Shroud of Turin is just another gospel of what happened. Everything on the shroud points. It's in every gospel. The wounds, the scourging, the crown of thorns, everything we read in the Gospels is seen on this piece of linen.
Absolutely amazing. And for people who want to find out more about you, Chuck, and your Salt River Productions and maybe your future projects, what's the best place where people can find out more?
Well, they could just go to Salt River Productions and saltriverproductions.com. And
to watch this program, the Holy Winding Sheet. The Holy
Winding Sheet. If somebody wants to watch it, just go do an internet search and put in the Holy Winding Sheet.
Well, we're so grateful to you, Chuck Neff, for putting together this fascinating film, The Holy Winding Sheet, about the Shroud of Turin, and for joining us on today's program.
Well, Michael, a pleasure to talk with you again, and thanks. I'm flattered you would ask, and it's my pleasure to be with you and all of your listeners today.
God bless.
And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Dan Cheely, talking about the Relics of the Passion, and Chuck Neff for talking to us about the Holy Winding Sheet, the Shroud of Turin. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. I traveled to Rocamadour in France to see the site where a bell rings at times of famous miracles high up in the mountains there in France. You can check that one out on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can also join me on a pilgrimage for this Jubilee year. I'll be going July 28th through August 4th to Rome, Milan, Florence, and Turin. We'll be seeing apparition sites of the Virgin Mary, visiting the Duomo in Milan, visit Turin to see the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, where the Shroud of Turin is held, walk in the footsteps of Pier Giorgio Frassati and see the place where St. John Bosco had his famous visions. We'll go to Florence, home to many great artists, of course, and we'll see the Michelangelo's David, and as well as the site of the Virgin Mary, to the 7 holy founders of the Servites. And we'll finish up in Rome to see the many incredible sites around the Vatican, and finish with the canonization of one of the great modern saints, Pier Giorgio Frassati. You can find out more if you sign up at pilgrimages.com/Miracle Hunter. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.